Hey, in this video, we're going to talk about inlining your code, your Lambda code in a CloudFormation file. And there is a lot of reasons why this is a bad idea, but there's one very good reason why it's a good idea in certain circumstances. So that's what this video is all about. In order to sort of talk about this, I've built this thing in the context of an AppSync application. So we have a query and a note. It's going to return a note. If we look at the resolver, it's connected to a Lambda data source, and here's the VTL here. So if we take a look at the code really quick, so it's just one single template.yaml file. We have our AppSync defined here. We have our schema defined here, an API key. For data sources, I got one that's connecting to my Lambda, and then this is just a role that's saying this data source is allowed to communicate with that Lambda. And then finally, for the AppSync part, I have a resolver that configures the VTL with the data source. Now, the point of this video is right here. And right away, we can see I'm defining my JavaScript code right here. And yeah, there's like a lot of reasons why this is a bad idea, but there's one really good reason. But before we talk about that, let's talk about the two options you have. First of all, by far the most common way to do it is to zip up all your JavaScript code, and this could include your node modules or whatever, and create an S3 bucket, upload the zip file to that S3 bucket, and then when you create your Lambda, the Lambda is going to refer to that S3 bucket zip file to understand what kind of code it's going to be running. Now, that's a lot. So you can do that manually. You can just you can manage all that yourself. Obviously, that's like a lot of work if you're like deploying Lambdas quite often. So it's way more common to use a framework to do all that stuff, whether that's the SAM framework or the serverless framework. So so that's by far the most common way to do it. The second option is to just literally write your code in the YAML right here. And so you can see zip file. Instead of actually providing a zip file, I'm just providing it a string of code. And one thing to notice about this is that, so I'm doing exports.handler, and then handler is index.handler. This would be the index. And I can bring in things that are globally available. Like I can bring in the AWS SDK, because that's automatically available no matter what to a Lambda function. So I could do something like EventBridge if I wanted to. So that's really important to know. I don't need to have node modules at all if all I'm doing is interacting with AWS resources. So this all works. And as we haven't tested it out. Why don't we go ahead and confirm that it works? It does. So this is content coming from right here. Okay, so why would you ever want to do this? Let's take a look at the reasons this is not good. So these are the ways in which inlining a Lambda code is worse than the alternative. You can only use one file, which is really just your string you provide. You can't npm init download node modules and then reference them, because this is everything. This is your one bit. This is the code right here. You can't run it locally. You can't run local unit tests because this is in a YAML file. No code highlighting. Look, it's just all one color. That's difficult. As far as I know, there's no ability to lint this string. And the really big limit here is it's a maximum of 4,096 characters. That's not very much code. So all these limitations, why in the world would anybody do this? Well, here are ways in which it's better. One, no S3 bucket involved. You don't need to zip files and upload them to S3. These two are not huge benefits because, again, if you just use serverless or SAM framework, this is just something you don't need to care about. So those frameworks take care of that. But the third reason why this is better, and the whole reason why I think it's worth it in some scenarios, is because of these limitations, you are forced to accomplish things with AWS managed services instead of custom code. And this is not really a technical thing. It's more of like a human thing. Like we have this, if you come from a development background, you have this bias towards just building everything yourself. If there's a problem, oh, let's just make some custom code for that. And we need to fight that bias as much as possible and reverse it to instead look for AWS managed services or non-AWS managed services like Stripe and so on to do these things for us. And this is the switch we need to make. And so, at least for me, when I start inlining functions, I can't write a whole lot of code here. The only thing I can interact with is the AWS SDK. And because I only have 4,000 characters, I need to write very small functions, which then motivates me to use step functions, for example. And now I'm using a managed service to take care of my flow of like control flow, like try catches and if statements and loops and all the rest. That's now happening in step functions. And then when you're forced to make these really small Lambda functions, you then are able to reuse them in your step functions, for example. So yeah, I would say that is the main benefit here, is that it's not a technical benefit. It's an ability to combat this human bias, or this bias that developers have, that I have, to just write code myself all the time. So, and then, the other nice benefit here is like, I have no JavaScript here. I have no node modules, no configuration. It's just one template file. That's kind of a nice thing as well. But anyways, yeah, so if you're ever in a situation where you just need to make a very small Lambda function, you don't need to spin up SAM framework, serverless framework, get your node modules going and all the rest. You can just inline it like this and then go from there.